Right, welcome back, everybody. So the Public Investment Corporation Commission, or the PIC, resumes today after a 2-week break. Now, before its adjournment, the Commission heard evidence from the PIC senior management that they went ahead and invested in the IO deal, despite the advice that the valuations were far too high and the decision to invest was not a prudent one. In his testimony, suspended PIC Assistant Portfolio Manager Victor Seanie said that this seemed to be because of the perceived personal relationship between the former Iqbal Survé and Matjila. But to unpack this all for us, we've got in studio Nompu Siziba. Of course, she's an SABC econ journalist and anchor who's been reporting on the Commission since its inception. Good to see you. Welcome.
Thanks, Leanne.
So we're picking up today. Any idea where we'll pick up from?
Well, I suspect there'll be a continuation of more staff members. I mean, Lex Mpati, who's the chair of the Commission, he's been calling out for more people to come to the Commission to give testimony. So it may well be that in the interim, while the Commission has been on the break, it's had more submissions and there'll be more testimony. So I'm expecting that they'll continue listening to staff members within the organisation, but there are also external people who are expected to come. UDM leader Bantu Holomisa, he has been very vocal, so he may well turn up there. I also saw an article yesterday which suggested that Matjila, who's the former CEO at PIC, indicated that the Commission has called him to come on board, and it'll be interesting to see what he has to say, because a lot of the allegations are focused on him.
Yeah. So I mean, there's no telling who we're going to kick off with today.
That's correct.
So it's kind of just you wait and see, and then we see what the revelations are. Quite interesting, though. I mean, a lot has been said at this inquiry so far, or not inquiry, a commission of inquiry. And I know we've got to get these right because they're all different. We've seen members of staff, executives in the company, former board members, Naledi Advisory Services, forensic investigations. So we've seen a lot going down there. But for you, what's really been telling? What have been your highlights so far?
Well, it was interesting because initially at the beginning there were a lot of executive heads of different departments. So there was the executive head of listed investments, Fidel Madavo, who's one of the people who was suspended by the PIC board. He gave testimony going through the motions of what the processes are at the PIC and so on. And the other executive heads did so as well. But I think what was very interesting was after Victor Seanie's testimony, when the Commission had its break, its 3-week break, it was only a few days later that the board of the PIC all decided in total to hand in their resignation. They formally tendered their resignation to Tito Mboweni, the finance minister, but they're still in place until such time he finds a new board. Several weeks ago, we were told that the minister would be finding a new board within a week. I mean, where do you find a new board within a week? That hasn't changed. So the situation is somewhat in limbo, because you still have a board there that technically doesn't want to be there because they've resigned.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that the Commission is getting to the gist of things? Because I know they're under very tight time constraints, as we were talking off air. I mean, this has to be, the findings got to be in by the 15th of April. Yeah,
so basically they need to submit their recommendations and their findings by the 15th of April. You think about it, Leanne, that's very tight, as you say. They were also supposed to submit an interim report on the 15th of February, and my understanding is that they did that. They handed that to the President around that time. That hasn't been made public, unlike the SARS one. You'll remember when that was released. Soon thereafter, the President decided to take action and actually fire Tom Moyane, who was the Commissioner of SARS. But he hasn't released that report. And they seem to be, keeping up with time. But depending on the number of submissions that they've got in the interim, they may well not have time. Apparently, that decision would lay with the President if there were to be an extension. But it seems as though they need to be done by the 15th of April.
Interesting. I want to go back to what you were talking about earlier, was Victor Seanie's evidence. Now, I mean, I suppose the question is, how damning is it when he was saying that the CEO, former CEO Matjila, was forced to invest with IO, carelessly risking public funds, and this all because of a personal relationship, an alleged relationship with Iqbal Survé?
That young man, his evidence was, it blew everything out of the water. Everybody else came out with, their evidence, and it was very sort of run-of-the-mill kind of evidence about processes and procedures. But when they were asked directly, do you believe that there was any impropriety at the PIC, most of them said, actually, no.
Yeah.
Right? But this guy, he just went all out and told it the way he saw it. And he was fearless. And one of the things that he raised is that he's the person that comes into contact with potential investments. He then evaluates those investments. I mean, he's a chartered accountant, he's a chartered financial analyst, highly qualified. He's been in the area for 10 years. And he gives advice to the portfolio manager as to whether this is a worthwhile investment to pursue. He gives a valuation on it, etc., etc. But one of the things that he noted was that his valuations and his recommendations and his conclusions can actually be fiddled around with by his seniors. He has no control over those whatsoever. So in other words, they can go directly and contradict that which he has suggested, which is problematic because why is he there in the first place?
Yeah.
So, and that's what he says was done with the IO deal. He basically, he gave it a very low valuation indeed. And he said that's not the only deal. There were other deals, particularly pertaining on the African continent, where they just ran over his head and made their own decisions. So what's the point? That was quite damning.
Yeah. I can imagine. But some of the things, and when you read media reports, there's a concern that the Commission has ignored the fact that the PIC board was fired by Minister Tito Mboweni a few weeks ago after a showdown with his deputy Mondli Gungubele at the ANC NEC meeting. This seems to have not been sort of taken centre stage much, has it?
Well, if you remember, Leanne, what happened was the Commission went to recess before the board resigned.
Okay.
So when the Commission resumes today, that is not going to be escapable. They will definitely speak to it. But it would be interesting because they don't give any conclusions, and
Some people call it grandstanding, I suppose. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, and it's not clear why the board decided to make the decision that it made. But in the meantime, a pivotal organisation that manages the funds of government employees, managing over 2 trillion rand, is functioning with a board that technically doesn't want to be there, and that's problematic. And then the minions on the ground, the Victor Seanies on the ground, who are trying to make the right calls, they get overridden. And to the detriment of investors or to the detriment of government employees. Apparently, the PIC invested 4.3 billion rand in the 29% stake in IO, and now that's worth a fraction thereof, and they've had to make write-downs on that particular investment. Now, it's okay for the pensioner, who's the government pensioner who's going to get their pension because they've got a defined benefit. They're guaranteed that money. But the negative thing is that at the end of the day, if the PIC makes wrong calls, it's us, the taxpayer, who have to fit the bill. So that's why it's so important.
Yeah. I just want to touch on one other issue. Former board member Claudia Manning, in her testimony, said she resigned because she didn't approve of the way the new chair, Deputy Finance Minister Mondli Gungubele's treatment of the CEO Dan Matjila was. What did you make of that?
That was such a puzzling piece of evidence, I must say. She was very articulate. You can see this lady is very qualified. They've reeled off all her qualifications. Very proper lady, seemingly. And she did indicate that when allegations were made about Dan Matjila asking somebody who had been funded by the PIC to lend or give money to somebody else. The board took issue with him to say that's not proper behaviour. So she did actually, flag the fact that he did something that the board didn't approve of. But generally, she says she found him to be professional and good to work with, etc., etc. But that wasn't her only reason why she resigned. Basically, Mr. Gungubele seemingly did not show confidence in the board as a whole. And that was the reason why she left. She didn't want to be part of a board that she felt there was no confidence in.
Yeah. Amazing. Just as we sort of wrapping up, and I've read a couple of articles about this and some analysis, and there was one that stood out for me saying Just a quote from the article saying, for the Commission to restore its integrity, it needs to investigate the untouchables, which include white businesses that receive more than 95% of all funding from PIC on the JSE. And this is just an opinion piece, but basically saying, to date, the fact that almost 100 billion rand of pensioners' monies have been lost to white-owned businesses in South Africa's economic landscape, and they have sort of not been touched during this commission. I don't know what your views are on
Yeah, and you
like
want
that.
to touch on a very hot topic just as we're about to round up. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I have a view on that, but I think, you know, there is a narrative out there that, you know, when money goes to BEE or black companies, there's more scrutiny, and I would definitely agree that probably there are many white companies that have been invested in, you know, that haven't really been up to the mark. But the bottom line is, black or white, you must ensure that your investment prognosis is correct, and your investment, you know, the reason why you invest in that thing is the correct reason, so that at the end of the day, your investors get their return because they deserve it.
It doesn't matter, as you say, but at the end of the day, any company that's been involved in wrongdoing need to be brought forward and brought into the light. So it's going to be interesting, but I think one of the most interesting testimonies, as you said at the beginning of the interview, would be from Bantu Holomisa, who started all of this. So
yes,
we should see him coming up in the next couple of days or
Absolutely,
weeks.
Yes. Well, I don't know when he's going to come up, if he's going to come up.
Exactly.
But certainly he is one of the instigators of this. You know, it was on the back of his remarks that this commission was set up by the president. And I'd just like to say, just from an operational SABC point of view, there is coverage today. My colleague Mbalenhle Mthethwa should be covering that, just to keep the nation up to speed as to what's coming out of the PIC Commission.
Fantastic, Nompu. Thank you so much for talking to us. Keep up the great work. Nompu Siziba, economics journalist and anchor, talking to us about what's transpired so far at the Commission just before its adjournment, and that was a fortnight ago. So still lots of revelations to come out there. And as you heard, stay tuned to SABC. We'll bring you all of those details. Let's take a break. See you.